Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Super Cool. This movie tells the story of an ordinary young man who has a crush on a beautiful girl at his school. In his depression that he couldn't approach her, he immediately turned handsome because of a myth and tried to approach his idol girl. Could he win the heart of his idol girl with his new look? Let's find out in Super Cool. Super Cool begins by showing a young man named Neil involved in a chase with a group of people kidnapping his crush, a girl named Summer. With the help of his best friend, a young man named Gilbert, Neil tries to save Summer, even though it is very dangerous for his life. Long story short, filled with cool tense actions like scenes performed by the main actor in an action film, Neil finally managed to save Summer and received praise from his idol, who considered him super cool. But unfortunately, all of these events are not real and are only fictional stories in a comic written by Neil. That morning, when Neil was engrossed in drawing comics, his younger sister, Jacqueline, choked him because he never dared to confess his love for Summer, a girl who had been his idol for so long. After enjoying breakfast with his family, Neil then asked permission from his parents and caught the school bus. Arriving at school, Neil continued to watch Summer from a distance. She looks happy because soon she will have a birthday and plans to party at her house. Summer then distributes birthday party invitation cards to her friends, but it seems she didn't invite Neil to her birthday party. Neil is a typical geeky boy at school and doesn't have many friends. Neil's only closest friend was a young man named Gilbert. While they were in class, Gilbert then told Neil about an 11:11 myth, that if someone made any wish at 11 o'clock at night and exactly at the 11th minute, then the request would be granted. Gilbert said the request must be said with sincerity and with all his heart if it is to be granted. According to rumors, some of the students at their school had already proven the truth of the myth. It even spread to other schools in many countries. In the middle of class, Summer suddenly apologized to the teacher for being late for class. She then sat down next to Chad, one of the most popular students in the school. Not only handsome, but Chad is famous for coming from a wealthy family. Summer seemed to be very close to him, and everyone thought they were the perfect couple. While having lunch in the cafeteria, Jacqueline and Gilbert urged Neil to confess his feelings to Summer. But Neil was already feeling hopeless before he did, especially because Summer didn't invite him to her birthday party. Jacqueline told him to ask for the invitation in person. At first, Neil refused, but because Jacqueline kept pushing him and Gilbert promised to accompany him when talking to Summer, he finally got up the courage to meet Summer. However, when dealing directly with his idol from such a close distance, Neil was stunned and unable to say anything. Worse than that, he felt really nervous when Summer looked at him, and immediately he threw up. Because her clothes were splashed by Neil's vomit, Summer immediately rushed to the toilet to clean it with shame and annoyance, because Neil had embarrassed her in front of many people. After that embarrassing incident, Neil often locked himself in his room and skipped school for days because he was ashamed and felt sorry for Summer. One day, Gilbert comes to Neil's house and intends to comfort his best friend for the embarrassing incident that happened to him some time ago. In the evening, Neil poured out his feelings to Gilbert and said that his crush on Summer is a waste because a beautiful and popular girl like her doesn't want to be with him who looks ordinary and doesn't come from a wealthy family. Neil once wished that he was born into a wealthy family and had a handsome face so that Summer would not feel embarrassed if she dated him. Neil was then frustrated because, at any time, he might never date Summer if things stayed the way they are now. After Gilbert came home, Neil brooded alone in his room while browsing Summer's social media timeline, where she posted a short video discussing the embarrassing incident involving Neil. Seeing this, Neil feels very guilty and hopes that this embarrassing incident never happened and he still has a chance to express his love for Summer. He hopes that he will be born into a wealthy family and become the most popular boy in school. After wishing in his heart, Neil then got ready for bed and didn't realize that the alarm clock in his room was 11:11 p.m. The next day, Neil wakes up late and rushes to school. However, when he arrived at school, Neil was surprised when everyone looked at him with awe. It didn't stop there. When Neil approached Gilbert in the school corridor, he suddenly turned away from him, as if he didn't know Neil and thought he was a stranger. Neil, who was increasingly confused, looked in the mirror and was very surprised to find that his face had changed entirely and he looked very handsome and cool. He finally realized that last night he probably made a wish at 11 o'clock in the evening at exactly the 11th minute. Neil then tries to convince Gilbert that he is his best friend by revealing the topic of their conversation last night. At first, Gilbert did not necessarily believe him just like that, but Neil continued to convince him by revealing their dirty little secrets that only they knew. Arriving at Neil's house, Gilbert and Neil meet Jacqueline, who is as surprised as Gilbert when she finds out that Neil's face has completely changed. The three of them then agreed to hide the changes that had occurred to Neil, where Jacqueline would help him keep it a secret from their parents. They decided to change Neil's name to Ace for a while so as not to invite the suspicion of others. Gilbert then took Neil to a clothing store to change Neil's appearance to be more attractive because Neil now has a very handsome face. Because his face was so handsome, Neil immediately caught the attention of others, including an Uber driver who thought he was a celebrity. Even when at the clothing store, Neil gets special treatment because of his handsome face. One of the male employees at the store gives him an exclusive invitation for free to attend a party which is said to be enlivened by many famous musicians, rich people, and famous celebrities. Neil then refused the invitation because it coincided with Summer's birthday party. But Gilbert forced him to accept the invitation, so Neil finally accepted the invitation. When Neil changed clothes and looked cooler, Gilbert invited him to meet Summer and asked for a birthday party invitation card. When Neil finally met Summer and talked to her without feeling nervous, he was surprised because Summer's attitude seemed normal when dealing with him, who had now turned into a handsome man, even though the other girls looked flabbergasted and embarrassed when faced with him. After giving Neil's birthday invitation card, Summer then hurried away from there, as if she didn't want to stay around him for long, even though he had turned out to be very handsome and cool. Neil immediately feels hopeless again when Summer leaves with Chad in his luxury sports car. Seeing this, Gilbert then invites Neil to meet his neighbor, a man named Jimmy, who has a luxury sports car. Because he rarely saw him, Jimmy didn't notice the change in Neil's face, but he knew Neil's parents. Neil and Gilbert then ventured to borrow Jimmy's luxury sports car while attending Summer's birthday party to impress Summer on Neil. Hearing this, Jimmy didn't seem to mind and took the two of them for a ride in his luxury sports car. But after that, Jimmy said they had to pay if they wanted to borrow the luxury car. Having no money, Gilbert gives an exclusive invitation given by the store employees and tells Jimmy that the party will be attended by the rich and famous celebrities, so he might be able to take advantage of the opportunity to add to his relationships and expand his business. After much deliberation, Jimmy finally agreed to the deal. Since Neil can't drive, Jimmy plans to pretend to be Neil's personal driver and drive Neil to Summer's birthday party. After that, Jimmy and Gilbert will attend a lavish party of the rich. Jimmy then asked them to wait for him at a convenience store near the gas station at 7 p.m. Then, Gilbert took Neil to the house of one of his friends to consult about matters of love and intimate relationships between two people who love each other. Neil looked confused and nervous, as this was the first time he had heard about sensual things in love being expressed so explicitly. That night, according to the agreement they had agreed upon, Neil and Gilbert then waited for Jimmy to arrive at the convenience store near the gas station. However, when Jimmy got there, he was wearing a mask and barged in there while pointing a gun at the male convenience store employee standing guard in front of the cash register. Unexpectedly, the employee turned out to have a shotgun for defense. After committing the robbery, Jimmy ordered Neil and Gilbert to hurry away. The three of them managed to escape and avoided being charged by the police because the police assumed that the shop's employees were just making it up when reporting on the robbery while driving a luxury sports car. According to the police's assumption, a person driving a luxury sports car wouldn't bother robbing a dime at a small convenience store on the outskirts of town. Elsewhere, Neil and Gilbert seem furious that Jimmy involved them in the robbery just now. They had no idea that Jimmy would do such a reckless act. Jimmy reasoned that he was just doing the robbery for fun because so far, his life was very boring with daily routines that made him very bored. He wants to do something challenging and adrenaline pumping. Since today is his birthday, Jimmy plans to do something stressful and fun, even if only once in his life. Jimmy then convinced Neil and Gilbert not to overthink the robbery because he was pretty sure they wouldn't be caught. The police would not believe the store employee's testimony about a luxury sports car driver robbing loose change. On the other hand, even though Neil and Gilbert's faces were caught on CCTV cameras, they were only considered ordinary visitors forced by the robber at gunpoint and would not be regarded as accomplices of the robber. Even so, Neil still can't just let it go because Jimmy has committed a crime that endangers the safety of many people. Neil was already fed up with Gilbert for getting him into trouble more often than not helping him. Neil, who is fed up with following all the advice from Gilbert, then decides to go to Summer's birthday party alone and doesn't want to ride Jimmy's luxury sports car, which may now be a fugitive from the police. Parting ways with Neil, Gilbert decides to go to a rich man's lavish party with Jimmy. Neil, who used an Uber driver to take him to Summer's house, was forced to stop briefly at a convenience store because the Uber driver had to refuel his car. However, when he entered the convenience store to buy chocolate for Summer's birthday present, Neil saw a policeman investigating a robbery case committed by Jimmy and found out where Neil and Gilbert were for questioning about the incident. But because Neil thought that the cop would catch him, he avoided the cop as much as possible. Unexpectedly, Neil met a man about to carry out a robbery at the convenience store and made himself a hostage. Luckily, he could escape from there, and the police managed to arrest the man who was about to commit a robbery. Elsewhere, Jimmy and Gilbert finally arrive at a fancy nightclub, where a VIP party is held. While Gilbert was trying to mingle with the other guests at the party, Jimmy instead sneaked into a special area and then tried to rob them at gunpoint. A shootout ensues between Jimmy and the guards there, which causes chaos at the party. Meanwhile, Neil finally arrives at Summer's birthday party, but he even felt awkward with the noise of the party because it was Neil's first time. Jacqueline, who was present at the party, tried to support Neil in being alone with Summer. Even she deliberately kept Summer's friends away so Neil could dance with Summer. However, after finally facing each other, Summer even looks uncomfortable when she is by Neil's side and chooses to find various reasons so that she can stay away from Neil. On the other hand, Chad, who saw the closeness of Summer and Neil from a distance, seemed jealous and planning something to get rid of the handsome and cool Neil from there. Meanwhile, at the VIP party, Jimmy and Gilbert were finally caught by the nightclub guards and interrogated directly by the nightclub owner, a woman named Victoria. Because Jimmy had made a mess and caused huge losses to her nightclub business, Victoria ordered her men to kill Jimmy and Gilbert. Hearing this, Gilbert then begged for their lives to be spared, but she refused. Gilbert then offers Jimmy's luxury sports car in exchange for Victoria's losses. Judging that the price of the luxury car was equivalent to the loss she suffered because of Jimmy, Victoria finally agreed to the offer. After taking Jimmy's luxury car keys, Victoria spared Jimmy and Gilbert's lives and let them both get out of there. But when they were about to go home, Jimmy saw his car was still in the parking lot and planned to take the luxury car back and asked Gilbert to help him. Their actions were caught by Victoria, but Gilbert was able to paralyze her, and they both finally managed to escape from there while getting Jimmy's luxury car back. After that, Jimmy takes Gilbert to his house to play a game, where Gilbert then meets Jimmy's father, who celebrates his son's birthday by bringing Jimmy a birthday cake like a child's birthday, even though he is now 30 years old. After eating the birthday cake, Jimmy and Gilbert went after Neil to Summer's birthday party. Elsewhere, Chad, who plans to humiliate Neil, then challenges him to a dance duel. Whoever wins the duel has the right to approach Summer, and the loser must accept defeat and stay away from her. Not even Neil said whether he would accept the challenge or not. Chad had gathered everyone, including Summer, and then showed his great ability in dancing. When it was finished, he then told Neil to start dancing. Neil, who was confused because all eyes were on him, was then surprised by the appearance of Gilbert, who invited Neil to dance with him, as they usually do in Neil's room. At first, Neil hesitated because he thought that his dance moves were not good, but Gilbert then calmed him and convinced him that he was very good at dancing. With Gilbert by his side, Neil started dancing to the beat. Unexpectedly, everyone looked amazed by Neil, including Summer, who looked happy when she saw Neil's performance while dancing. Because he received a warm welcome and applause from his friends, Neil became more confident. After that, Gilbert apologized to Neil for everything he had done, which turned out to get him into trouble. Neil forgave him and apologized to his best friend for being rude. When Summer approached him to compliment his appearance, Neil suddenly felt nauseous from being too nervous, so he rushed to the toilet before throwing up in Summer's presence. Chad is jealous of seeing Summer and Neil's closeness, then pushes the toilet cubicle when Neil is in it. The toilet cubicle ended up falling into the pool and polluting the water. Neil, who already knew that it was Chad's doing, pushed him into the swimming pool. Knowing that the party had gone awry because of that incident, Summer kicked Neil out of there. On the other hand, one of Summer's friends informs them that the police have come there. Hearing this, everyone panicked and ran outside. Two policemen were seen checking the visitors' cars who attended Summer's birthday party and finally found the car they were looking for, Jimmy's sports car. Realizing that they have been caught, Jimmy and Gilbert finally have another way to escape from there. After successfully escaping with a car in Summer's garage, they then visited the convenience store they had previously robbed and carried out a reckless act of self-defense, pretending to be the victims of a shooting. Unexpectedly, the police believed the false statement made by Jimmy and arrested the convenience store employee. Jimmy and Gilbert were then rushed to the hospital, where Jimmy then thanked Gilbert for being willing to accompany him to do stressful and fun things on his very special and memorable birthday. Meanwhile, when the clock strikes 11 o'clock at night, because of the urging of his younger sister, Neil returns to Summer's house to help Summer clean up the mess at the party. Arriving at Summer's house, Neil met Summer and gave her chocolate as a birthday present. Unexpectedly, she welcomed Neil's arrival, and they both then ate the chocolate together. When Summer calls himself Neil instead of Ace, he finally realizes that his face has returned to normal, no longer handsome and cool like Ace. Summer then revealed that, in fact, she was more comfortable making friends with ordinary boys like him. Because every day, she felt pressured to always look beautiful and attractive just so that she would have many friends and be admired by handsome and wealthy young men. Summer finally realized that what she needed was not popularity but sincerity and comfort in a relationship where she could be herself and be friends with whoever she wanted. Hearing Summer's words just now, Neil felt very lucky to be born as an ordinary young man for the first time. After that, Neil invites Summer to dinner. They visit Neil's father's food truck, where Neil introduces Summer as his friend to his father. While they were having dinner, Summer spoke about her dreams, while Neil was a good listener. After that, she asks about Neil's dreams and plans for the future. He then revealed to her that he had received a scholarship from the art faculty of a university renowned for his talent in drawing. She seemed amazed to hear that and asked him to show his work. At first, Neil was reluctant to show his work to Summer because he did not want her to know that she was the inspiration for most of his work. But because she kept pushing him, he finally showed his work to her. Seeing Neil's works, which were mostly inspired by her, Summer then felt amazed at Neil and praised his ability to draw. Summer then told Neil that what makes a man look cool is not his appearance but because of his skills. She then praised him by saying that he was super cool. The moral that can be learned from this movie is to stay true to ourselves and act as we are without pretending, because then we will meet people who will accept and love us as we are, and who will always support us under any circumstances.